In episode 60, the story begins with Snarf in Unicorn Forest. And that's when, by surprise, he sees Jackalman of the mutants. And by the time that he did, that's when Snarf ran off. But he had no idea that Jackalman was pursuing him to the River of Despair. Well, good news for Snarf, he made it to the River of Despair, and he was shouting at Lionel that was across the way. From the Bridge of Light, of course. He said, "Help! Help!" And bad news for Snarf, Jackalman was still behind him. So speaking of Lionel back with him, he just heard Snarf yelling, so he said, "Hang on," and he crosses the Bridge of Light. Back with Snarf, he still was pursued by Jackalman of the mutants, until he jumped into the River of Despair. Snarf, that is. So back with Snarf, he had nowhere else to go except to jump into the River of Despair, so that's what he did. Next thing you know, Lionel shouted, "Where are you?" "I'm in the river," Snarf said. So when Lionel saw that Jackalman was running off, that's when Lionel says, "Just keep swimming. I'll be right there." So he dove into the river just like what Snarf did. It was right after Lionel left his sword and his claw shield behind. And back with Jackalman, speaking of which, he saw the claw shield and the sword that was left behind by Lionel while Lionel went to rescue Snarf. Well, back with Jackalman, he was about to take the sword and the claw shield, but he should have realized that Lionel and Snarf were not the only ones there, because also there was Panthro, and he just catches Jackalman in the act. He said, "Not so fast." Now, luckily for Panthro, he wouldn't allow Jackalman taking the sword and the claw shield out without a fight. So Panthro decided to go one-on-one with Jackalman, so that's what he did. But before the battle can begin between Panthro and Jackalman, Lionel comes out of the water, but he's not alone because he has Snarf with him. Well, good news, he rescued him. But now, according to Jackalman, he pleaded his case with Panthro. He says, "If I can't have the sword, then neither should you," and attacked him. Now, back with Jackalman, instead of grabbing the sword and the claw shield, he kicks them both into the river. So back with Panthro and Lionel, when they found out what had happened, Lionel dove into the river first, and then next is Panthro, while Snarf stays behind. Back with Snarf, he just caught a cold, but good news for Panthro and Lionel, they just got out of the river. Also the good news, Lionel got his claw shield and his sword back. So now that Lionel and Panthro are out of the water, though we didn't see it, but it is confirmed. As for Lionel, he's carrying Snarf on his back, and he's asking, "Are you okay?" Well, Snarf says not only that he's fine, but he says that Jackalman could have caught him. But luckily for him, he's a little too smart for him. But after Lionel heard him sneeze and says, "That's true, but you could have drowned in a river," he said. Then Snarf made a suggestion to carry the sword for Lionel, and the reason being is because if he did that, no one would bother him. "Let's just get to the lab," Lionel said, although he agrees with Snarf's suggestion. Then, aha, Panthro says that he has an idea. He says when they get back to the lair, they can create a sword for Snarf. "Of course, with the sword of your own," Panthro said, "you can fight all the units you want to." Then Lionel thought about Panthro's suggestion, then asked the question, "Do you really think you can duplicate it? Can you pull it off?" Well, Panthro not only said that yes, he will, but there's just no substitute for the Eye of Thundera, and he's not kidding. So meanwhile at Cat's Lair, in the meeting room, we have Tigra, Lionel, Snarf, and Panthro. And good news for Panthro, he had just finished duplicating the Sword of Omens, just like what Lionel had. So after Panthro was done practicing, that's when Tigra says, "Hey, watch what you're doing with that thing." So, long story short, Tigra asked a question, "Have you all gone crazy?" Well, luckily for Panthro, he gives the sword to Snarf, but it's not exactly the real deal. So, after that, Tiger asked another question, but this time to Lionel. "What is going on here?" So Lionel says, "You can relax, it's not the real Sword of Omens." And Snarf was more than happy to show it to Tigress, so he did. Then Panthro goes next to speak in his case to Tigra to say that he had forged the sword, well, except for the Eye of Thundera. Although Tiger seems impressed, but then asks the question, why? Well, Lionel explained to Tiger that in Mumra's and in the mutant's case, every bad guy on the Earth wanted to get their hands on the sword. So Panthro not only agrees with Lionel, but then he suggested, why not let the bad guys have it, but instead of the real deal, give them the fake one instead? So Snarf agrees with that idea. So Lion says, listen, here's the plan. All we have to do is just send a message to let every bad guy know that the sword's in the lair and that the lair itself is unguarded, he suggested. Meanwhile, the Thundercats were on their way back to the cat's lair, except for when Wily Kid fell off. So her brother was asking her, are you all right? Well, good news, she's fine. Now, according to Wily Kid, she says that there's a problem with the spaceport, so her brother suggested to look at it. But they had no idea that the Trollocs were watching them. Back with Wily Cat, he just let his sister know that the Trollocs are watching them. So, his sister, Wily Cat, is asking him, can you fix that spaceport? Well, I don't want to be late, Wily Cat said. Well, neither do I, her brother said. If I know Lionel and the others, Wily Cat says, they're probably there at the Burble Village already, he said. And of course, they left the lair somewhat unguarded, Wily Cat said. That's true, Wily Cat said. At least Snarf will be there. That's true, his sister said, but there's a problem. He's got a cold. Then Wily Cat has her turn to ask her brother, what if somebody comes in and steals the Sword of Omens while we are away? She said. Besides, Wily Kid said, here's a bigger problem and a question. How can Snarf deal with all these bad guys once it happens? Well, good news for Wily Cat, he just fixed up his sister's spaceport. So he tells her, well, we better hurry if we want to get to the Burble Village and to the party on time, he said. And so both the Thunderkins head off. Now, the Trollocs who had just watched them moments ago, they told each other, hey, the Thundercats had left the lair unguarded, and the Sword of Omens that is there is being left behind. Then the Trollocs also said that they can tell the news to the mutants, and of course the Trolloc will get paid, especially when they hear about it, so the Trollocs decided to tell the news to the mutants at Castle Plondor. So meanwhile, at Castle Plondor, that's exactly what the Trollocs did. They told the news to the mutants. So in the castle's control room, Monkey and the other mutants just heard the news, and now he's telling it to Jackalman. But Jackalman dismisses Monkey and when Monkey said that the lair is unguarded. Then Monkey says, wait, here's some even better news. Snarf is there at the lair, but he could be easily be dealt with, he said. After Jackman had heard the good news, he told Monkey that we had to report this to Slythe right away. Slythe? Monkey asked, what do we need him for? So, Monkey said to Jackalman, I have a better suggestion. Once we get the Sword of Omens for ourselves, we'll put Slythe on kitchen duty, he said. So, after Jackalman and Monkey had left the castle, they had arrived at Cat's Lair. Then, long story short, after Jackalman and Monkey were busy cleaning and making it across, watching it on screen in the control room was Snarf. So after Snarf had a confirmation that Lionel's plan had worked so far, so back with the mutants, they're now inside the lair and inside the sword chamber. But which sword did they take? So thinking it was the real sword, or so they thought, so Monkey had pleaded his case to tell Jackalman that the sword would be theirs and along with the Eye of Thundera. Then Jackalman had a thought and that something was off, and then told Monkey it's just a little easy, or so they thought. So Monkey had asked Jackalman a question, you're not scared, are you? So they both went into the sword chamber. So back with the mutants, they thought the sword chamber was empty, but they had no idea that Snarf was watching them from inside. He was going to sneeze, but then didn't, and that's when Jackalman told Monkey, we gotta get out of here, and so they did. But just when the mutants were about to leave with the sword, or at least that's what they thought, that's when Snarf sneezed, and that distracted Monkey and the mutants, and then told Jackalman to go after him, so he did. It was during the pursuit that Snarf's blanket fell off and covered him, and then Snarf ran into the other direction, but instead ran into Monkey, and so he ran into Jackalman again. And when Snarf ran underneath him, that's when Jackalman grabbed his tail. So back with Jackalman, who's still holding Snarf's tail, he was asking Monkey to come help him, but by surprise, Snarf just bites his arm. Back with Snarf, he was about to get away, but by surprise, Monkey just grabs him from behind. So Snarf says, "You put me down, you creep." And that's when the mutants who chose to ignore him, and that's when Jackalman pleaded his case with Snarf to say this is the end for him. So the mutants were about to leave the lair with both the sword, but they're not sure which one, and Snarf as well. So before the mutants can leave, that's when Monkey made a suggestion to say we should keep him with us just in case, if we needed some negotiating, he suggested. So meanwhile, Lionel and Panthro are in the Thunder Tank. They're now on their way back to the lair. Now Lionel is getting worried and then told Panthro that it was a mistake to leave Snarf all by himself. "It's no problem," Panthro said. "All he has to do is lay low for a while." But just when Panthro was about to finish his case, Lionel's sword, the real deal, had just told him what was going on. So just like what any good guy would do, Lionel looked through the sword's eye, and when he did, he saw that the mutants had left the lair already and captured Snarf. And of course, the Sword of Omens, and of course, the mutants had no idea that the sword that they had stolen earlier was fake. So back with Lionel, thanks to his sword who told him what was going on, he then told Panthro the bad news, that that little joke that they had with the fake sword, it didn't work, or so they thought. So now in the Thunder Tank, it's up to Lionel and Panthro to rescue Snarf. So back with the mutants. So back with Monkey and Jackalman of the mutants, they are going to meet up with their leader, Slythe, and they're arguing about who's taking what and etc. Then Monkey started to plead a case that Jackalman shouldn't be trusted because the moment he gets his hands on the sword, he'll just run off with it. "I thought we were friends," Jackalman said when it's his turn to plead his case. Although Monkey agrees with Jackalman when he said that they are friends, but according to Monkey and what he says in his case, that the sword belongs to him and he has the power and etc. But then a voice comes out of nowhere. He said, "Not yet, you don't. It's Sly, the mutant's leader, and he just met up with Monkey and Jackalman." So, back with Slythe, he just told Monkey to hand over the sword, but Monkey refused. And the reason why he refused is because he pleaded his case with Slythe to tell him that both he and Jackalman had found it and they're the ones who should keep it. So even though Jackalman agrees with Monkey, but then Slythe had to silence him, and then tells Monkey again to hand over the sword, and finally Monkey agrees. Back with Slythe, he just asked Jackalman the question, "What you got in there?" "It's Snarf," Jackalman said. Now remember, he was kidnapped from the cat's lair earlier, and along with a sword, which still the mutants had no idea that that sword was fake, and that Lionel had the real one. At least not yet. So Jackalman was told by Sly to hand over Snarf. And while he's doing that, Snarf just says, "Get me out of here!" Then Sly, after he heard it from Snarf, he says, "Don't worry, I'll let you out of here once we get to Castle Plondor," he said. So after, long story short, Slythe had pleaded a case with Snarf, and then he said, "In the meantime, I'm sure Monroe would be pleased to pay me for that Sword of Omens," he said. He still had no idea that that's not the real Sword of Omens. It's a fake. So Sly told Jackalman and Monkey to meet him at the castle where they could be waited with further instructions. So they did. Back in the Thunder Tank with Panthro and Lionel just told Panthro, "And if anything happens to Snarf, I'll tear the mutants apart and their castle," he said. Well, Panthro, although he tries to make Lionel feel better the best way he knew how, he says, "Don't worry, we'll be there in half an hour. Just hang on." And so the Thunder Tank still heads off. Later, back with Slythe, the leader of the mutants, he had just arrived at the Black Pyramid calling for Mumra outside. Meanwhile, in the tomb chamber, Mumra woke up by the sound of Slythe's voice from outside. Outside, back with Slythe, he heard Mumra said, "You better have a good reason for waking me up," he said. "As a matter of fact, I do," Slythe says, "and better than that, we have some business to take care of and to discuss with," he said. And so Slythe goes into the pyramid and at the tomb chamber to meet up with Mumra. So meanwhile, in the tomb chamber, that's when Mumra told Slythe when he pleaded his case to say, "You seem very pleased with yourself. You should respect me very well," Slythe says. "What did you say? Me respect you?" Mumra asked. So Mumra pleaded his case by asking Slythe a question. "Why should I?" "Well," Slythe says, "I got some good news. I got the Sword of Omens for you," but still neither of the bad guys, Slythe and Mumra, had any idea that that sword that they had was fake, but they were unaware of it. So Mumra was pleased to hear the good news from Slythe, and also still the bad guys had no idea that Lionel had the real sword. So as Mumra turns to leave, and that's when Slythe says, "Hold it right there." Then Slythe started to plead his case to Mumra that the sword belongs to him. "Really?" Mumra says. "So you dare to claim that sword as your own?" he asked. "I'll tell you what I'll do," Sly says. "I'll let you use it. That is, if you do me one simple favor, is to share the secret of the pyramid's power with me," he suggested. But Monroe refused and then pleaded his case to say he would never share any pyramid secrets with anybody, and especially with Sly. So guess what he did? He did what any bad guy would do. As always, he transforms himself into his monstrous form with the spirits of evil statues, of course. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention it. It was after Mumra told Slythe to hand the sword over. So while Slythe was watching Mumra transform, he accidentally dropped Snarf. So after Mumra finishes transforming, he goes one on one with Slythe. But before he can do that, he continues to get closer and closer to Slythe until finally, at last, something happened that made Slythe drop the fake sword, which Mumra was not aware of. So Slythe says, "Here, take it." So after Sly told Mumra is all his, or so he thought, that's when Mumra sent Slythe away, and so Slythe ran off. Oh, and as for Snarf, he's now watching Mumra in his tomb chamber of the Black Pyramid, pleading his case to say that the Sword of Omens now belongs to him, but still, Mumra had no idea that that sword was a fake, and that Lionel has the real one. So later at night, back with Panthro and Lionel in the Thunder Tank, they finally arrived at Castle Plundar, but there's only one problem. They had no idea that Snarf's no longer there. As the Thunder Tank was about to break into the castle, inside were Jackalman, Monkeyman, and Vultureman that was building a cannon. So Jackalman panicked and told Vultureman to hurry up. The reason? Because Jackalman just told Volterman that the Thundercats will break down the door of the castle at any time. True, Volterman says, and when they do, they'll get the surprise they'll never forget, with a cannon, of course. So back with Volterman, the cannon is all ready to go. So he told the other mutants, Jackalman and Monkey, to hide, and he himself has to hide to prepare the cannon. So by the time that the Thunder Tank went inside the door of the castle, and that's when Voltron fires the cannon on the Thunder Tank. Now, the tank couldn't move anywhere because inside, Panthro just told Lionel that the controls are not working. "Open the hatch," Lionel said, and so Panthro did. When Lionel came out of the hatch of the Thunder Tank, he did what any good guy would do, use his sword's power to block the cannon's attack. So he did. So back with the mutants, they were shocked and surprised, and that's when they should have realized. Yes, it is true. Lionel has the real Sword of Omens, and that the sword that was given to Mumra earlier by Slythe is really a fake. So the Thundercats joke did work after all. So even though Jackalman told Monkey that that was impossible, but it is indeed true. That is indeed the real sword of omens that Lionel has. So yes, the mutants have been tricked all along. So back with Lionel still using his real sword's power to block the cannon's attack. Vultureman, who is now all upset because thanks to Lionel's real sword's power, the cannon was evaporated. Then Lionel told the mutants, Monkey and the Jackalman, to release Snarf this minute or else pay the consequences. Suddenly, Monkey and the other mutants just let slip to Lionel that Snarf's not with them anymore. Jackalman explains that just moments ago, Slide just took Snarf to the Black Pyramid and he's with Mumra in the tomb chamber. And that's where he is right now. But what Lionel doesn't even realize is that Slide had just left the pyramid moments ago. When Lionel found out that for once the mutants was telling him the truth and that Snarf was at the Black Pyramid, so the Thunder Tank and along with Panthro and Lionel head straight there. But on the Thunder Tank's way out, that's when they saw Slythe, who was on his way to the castle. But just when finally at last the Slythe had arrived at the castle, and that's when he sees the Thunder Tank coming. And by the time that he saw it, he jumped into the moat, getting out of the tank's way. So finally the Thunder Tank leaves the castle. So meanwhile, back at the Black Pyramid's tomb chamber, there's Snarf, and he's all alone with Mum Ra, who still had no idea that the sword that he had just moments ago was fake. So just like what any bad guy would do, what Mumra did is that he asked the spirits of evil for one simple request, a favor if you will, to open up the Eye of Thundera, but he still had no idea that that's not the real Sword of Omens. Not yet anyway. As that's going on, back with the Thunder Tank, it had finally arrived at the Black Pyramid, but before Lionel could get on with his mission, that's when Panthro begged him to call the other Thundercats for help. But Lionel refused and then explains to Panthro that since the fake sword was his idea, he has to face Mumra alone. Although Panthro agrees. So after Panthro had pleaded his case with Lionel in which he agrees, he being Lionel, Lionel does what any good guy would do, summon a Thundercat signal from his sword. The real deal, of course. Back at Cat's Lair, the four Thundercats that seen the signal were Tigra, Chitara, and the Thunder Kittens. Now that they know where Lionel is and is at the Black Pyramid, the four of them are on their way. But in the meantime, back with the Thunder Tank with Lionel and Panthro, they're on their way to get inside the Black Pyramid's tomb chamber, so that's what they did. Long story short, as the Thunder Tank was about to get in, that's when Mumra pleaded his case to tell the Thundercats that they are powerless without their sword, but he still had no idea that that sword was a fake and that Lionel has the real deal. Then, long story short, still behind one of the statues was Snarf, and he's also there. Back outside with the Thunder Tank, when Mumra uses his power, it flipped the Thunder Tank upside down. Luckily, Lionel got out, and so did Panthro. So after Panthro got out with a little bit of help from Lionel, of course, he asked him, "Are you okay?" Well, luckily he'll be fine. So Lionel says, "Stay here. I'll go find Snarf." And so he heads off. So, thanks to Lionel's sword power, the real deal, and not the fake one, he had blasted his way inside of the Black Pyramid. So, back with Snarf, who's still in the pyramid's tomb chamber, he was dreaded with worry and fear. After, long story short, Snarf had heard Lionel's voice, he was glad to hear him or see him, whichever the case. And that's when Murmur had pleaded his case, with Lionel, of course. So now that Lionel and Snarf are united at last, that's when Murmur pleaded his case with Lionel to say that he is doomed, because he has the Sword of Omens, or so he thought. So when Lionel uses his real sword's power, Murmur couldn't believe it. And he says, "But," and then by surprise, Lionel just let slip to Mumra that what he has right now is the fake sword and not the real deal. So yes, Mumra unfortunately had been tricked. Then Lionel decided to bluff him, it says, "If you don't believe me, why don't you open that sword that you got right there and you can see for yourself? Then you can realize that it is fake. Go ahead, try it." And so Mumra did. Well, Mumra thought that the sword that he had that was a fake one would obey him, or so he thought. But then when the eye opened up by surprise, he was horrified by his own reflection. So yes, what Mumra should have realized that what Lionel said was true. That sword was a fake, and that Lionel has the real deal. So yes, Momra has been finally defeated by his own reflection, and you can tell he's not very happy about it. So what Lionel also said was true, that the reflection was his only downfall, his being Momra's. So before Mumra can go to his sarcophagus, he told Lionel, "Someday I'll find your weakness. You'll see." And so he goes to his sarcophagus. So once again, the bad guy's plan backfired thanks to Lionel's joke. So back with the Thunder Tank and Panthro, and although it is confirmed that the rest of the Thundercats left to meet him there, and so by the time that Lionel had arrived, Chitara went first to ask a question. What happened? Then Tiger went to speak in his case to say he and the Thunderkins and Chitara came as fast as they could when they heard what had happened. Then Panther asked Lionel, "Is everything go all right in there?" Well, Lionel not only told Panther that everything went fine, oh, let's not forget, with Lionel and Snarf, he's also out of the pyramid just like what Lionel did. And so what Lionel explained to Panther that the fake sword did work, and that when Murmur saw his own reflection, he was horrified. He despised it. Of course, Snarf has his turn to plead a case, and of course he's not kidding. It's like you said, Panthro, it's no problem. Of course, in Snarf's case, he's not wrong, so you guess you know what this means. The Thundercats trick did work after all. So, even though it's confirmed that everybody left the Black Pyramid, they're now back at Cat's Lair. So, meanwhile, in the Sword Chamber, that's when Tigress showed up to find out what was going on with Snarf, and he'll never get well any faster if he doesn't stay in bed. Well, according to Panther, what he says in his case, he just wanted to look at his sword, and the next thing he'll ask for is a thunder tank, he said. Next thing you know, Snarf shows up. I guess he overheard Panther when he said that. So he told his case to Panther to say, "You know something? Having myself a thunder tank is a good idea," he said. So Snarf says, "I can just see it all now," and he can just imagine himself what it's like to be driving the Thunder Tank, just like what Panther did, and fight all these mutants and etc. And that's when Tiger had pleaded his case with Snarf to say, "If you don't try to get better and stay in bed," then what Tiger said in his case to Snarf to said the next thing that Snarf will do is to have a battle with him. So it's now up to Lionel to take matters in his own hands and escort Snarf to his room where he can rest up. And on the way, Snarf just says, "Oh, I just wish that my nose would fall off so I don't have to blow it all the time." Well, Lionel gives Snarf some advice, an advice he'll never forget. "Be careful what you wish for because you just never know what you're going to get," he said. Then Lionel also said to Snarf, "Remember what happened to Mumra? He wished for the Sword of Omens, but he didn't know it was fake up until that very moment. And look where it had got him. Nothing but trouble," he said. So you know what that means. Now, thanks to Lionel, Snarf decided to go right back to bed where he can rest and get well. So he heads off. So after Snarf heads off to his room, that's when Tiger told Lionel, "I'll cheer up. I'm sure he'll get better in a couple of days." In the meantime, Lionel suggested, "That'll give you plenty of time to build a thunder tank for Snarf," he said. Of course, Lionel suggests this to Panthro. If he can make a sword, why not a thunder tank for Snarf? Maybe someday. But in the meantime, yes, it's true, the Thundercats win once again. So that ends episode 60.